Omakase, the life and words of author M. Karen. If this is our first time meeting each other, let me give you a brief introduction. My name is Max. I write books for a living. Since we're still in the month of Halloween, I figured I would share a spooky tidbit about myself. What was the movie that, while growing up, terrified me to my core and left me emotionally scarred and terrified of spooky movies for the rest of my life? That last part is not particularly true. But going back through my memories, I think the movie that I watched on VHS, this is how old this is, that actually terrified me. And, I was a kid, so, not particularly a hard feat, but I remember the imagery of a certain movie by the name of Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Or was it Killer Clowns from Mars? I forget, I watched the Spanish version, so. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And it was the imagery of these creepy clowns enveloping people as though, the way that a spider would do. That creeped me out when I was a kid. And by the way, my pronouns are they, them. And while on the subject of Killer Clowns from Outer Space, or whatever that movie was called, fun fact, I ended up, when I first moved to the US, I ended up moving to a town next to the town where that movie was originally shot. And isn't that funny? That's just kind of the way life works sometimes. Sometimes you just end up coming back or arriving at a familiar place without even knowing it. Hi there. My name's Max, and welcome to my writing advice and inspiration and silliness on my part podcast Omakase. If you're unfamiliar with the format, it's pretty simple. I tell you a little bit about me, my week, what I've been doing since the last time we talked. I also go over viewer questions. Today we're going to be going through a quick question on pen names and a whole segment on National Novel Writing Month, or Nanowrimo. And then we'll go into the prompt, a creative segment for you to think about your stories. Today's prompt is a particularly fun one that I came up with like 2 nights ago, and I wrote it down, and I thought this is a great idea for a prompt. Before I go on anywhere though, housekeeping, you know the dealio. In the description of this podcast/video, there is a link to the song that you hear at the beginning and end of the show, which is titled Dream of Green by the OC Jazz Collective, and a link to treating me to a cup of coffee if Patreon is not your cup of tea. There you go. And now, with all that stuff out of the way, let's dive into the first segment of the show, my week. What have I been doing since the last time we talked? What media have I been consuming? What creative work have I been working on? Drum roll, please. The novel that I was working on, Alba, has now been sent to my beta readers. I completed the last revision phase. I pushed through it. It was a hard revision phase, mostly because I found myself looking for things to fix. I'd been rereading through the story, and while there was a little bit of a bump at the very beginning of the first chapter, it just required a little bit of adjusting in one particular passage. After that, the story flowed, and it flowed in the way that I wanted it to flow. And there were fixes. There were, a couple sentences that had to be, rephrased for flow. But I was reading it out loud. I was reading it, mindfully reading the story as though before an audience, being mindful of what I was saying, what my characters were saying, and the overall meaning of the story, like I talked last week. And I finished it. And I realized that I had cleaned through the entire story, and if there was something I overlooked and something I missed, I was not going to find it by reading through the story again. So, it was time to send that novel off to someone else. And that's what I did. I went through my usual printing company, and I actually printed them in paperback, 8.5 by 11 inch copies of the novel with plenty of margin space. I made like a phony cover just, so that it would have something on it. And I ordered them, and like I usually mail them myself, but I did the math, I'm a big nerd for numbers, and I'm like, wow, it's actually cheaper to just mail them directly from the manufacturer, or the printers, excuse me. So I did that, and it was extra bad or extra hard for me because usually when I go through this process, I used to go to like, Staples or, a, local printing company, and that was way more expensive, hence why I'm not doing it. But when I would do that, I would have this moment as I'm watching the pages come out of the printer, and I would have this realization that the story was off my hands. That, even if I were to look at it again, I could make no changes, because the version of the story that is going to reach the hands of my beta readers is not the one I'm working on anymore. And not to be dramatic, but I kind of consider it like, no, this is dramatic either way. I think it's sin to keep editing that story while someone else is reading it. Oh man, I'm gonna be really crimson. Excuse me if I sound like a big jerk for the next 2 minutes. It pains me. I think it is disrespectful to your beta readers to just send them out a copy of your book and then you keep working on it. Particularly because your beta readers are only going to read your story for the first time once. You only get their first impression once. So I try to make it the best first impression possible. It's not that I want to send it to my beta readers and have them all come back to me and say, Max, you nailed everything. The book is perfect. But I don't want them to waste their time pointing out typos. I don't want them to waste their time pointing out sentence structure. Let's just say that I have known people who would give out a beta draft and then they would keep on editing it. So when you would meet with them for beta feedback, they would be like, oh yeah, I already fixed that, and I already fixed that. And deep down I would be like, then why did you waste my time making me, read through this draft that still had a lot of work that needed to be done, while you yourself could have just saved me that time by doing that work that you ended up doing anyway, and then giving me the draft. That was a rough time, and as always, learning from the mistakes of others, Experiencing that from several people made me go, you know what, I never want my beta readers to go through that. So, I gave it my all. When I was reading that finalized draft, especially like the last second half of the book, flowed just like I wanted it to. And outside of like, we're talking about fixing words. Literally, this word here or this comma here is not as effective as I would like, so it would move stuff around. But outside of that, the rest of it flowed like I wanted it to. And I'm not concerned with getting feedback about, sentence structure or typos. I doubt I left any. Or repeated words. Or, even formatting errors. I'm mostly looking forward to feedback on the story. Because if you have never read any of my work, I write weird stories. And I'm not doing that with a sort of like, they are more than the norm. Oh, these are stories outside, true experiments of the medium. Oh man, I never get to bring up that voice. I only bring up that voice on my other channel. True experiments of the medium. No, I just write weird. Oh my god. Yanto! Hey guys, you hear my cat in the background? He's like, let me into the studio. I'm a cat. You know what? I'll bring him in. Hey, Yanto! He's so cute! Alright. Back on the subject of stories. It's not that I purposefully try to write stuff that's weird. It's moreover that I get these ideas and I always fully commit to them. I find it always kind of disheartening when someone has a really cool idea, but they don't commit to it. And they're like, yeah, the story's weird, so we're gonna put in a bunch of normal everyday stuff so you don't, so that you're not too surprised when you experience it. I don't know. That came off way more snotty than I meant. But if you're unfamiliar with my work, you are not familiar with the way that I do things and, the ridiculous nature or extreme nature of my characters and their stories and their situations. And let's just say that extreme is one way to summarize or explain the situation in which Alba finds herself in. And a part of me is worried that I didn't handle it the best. I tried my best, and I try to make it as polished and as clear as possible, the meaning and the overall message that the characters are carrying through. But it's likely that I made a mistake. And I guess that, going back to one of the 10 loose threads that I, started in this conversation, when I would print the book physically, at a Staples or something, at a printing, press, and I would see the pages, pouring out, I would realize that it was out of my hands, and I would realize that the weirdness that I've put on the page was kind of final. And that was the version of the weirdness, or the strangeness as I used to call it. That's the version of the strangeness that they are going to experience. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about the story. A little bit of second guessing myself, a little bit of worrying that I didn't nail the elements that I wanted, a little bit of worrying that they won't catch the foreshadowing, or they won't notice the sneaky ways in which I established what was to come later without just, flat out telling you. I try to always do my best in putting things in the background for those who are paying attention. And also establishing things so that they exist in the foreground of your mind, or if anything, the background of the events. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. That story's out of my hands now. By the time that this podcast goes up, it's likely that the printed book is heading off to my beta readers. And that's why it's different, because I just pressed a button and a copy of the book is heading their way. And it's strange. And I guess I'm too hard on myself. That's what Kitty says. But and she's going to be reading it too, because she's so one might argue she is my most important reader, and I am worried that she might not like the story. But I feel like I'm being, as she said, I'm being hard on myself. I'm being very critical on myself, and that's not inherently a bad thing, because I want to make the best stories that I can. I found this world and this character in Alba and in her world, and I want to give it justice. Not just her, but the rest of the cast, because I found a really interesting world. And I sought to dedicate myself fully to that strange place. So, this is the part of the book-making process that I refer to as a graduation. Every step along the way, there's a graduation. A book goes from a first draft, from an idea to a first draft, and from a first draft to a revised draft. And from a revised draft to beta feedback. That book has achieved its graduation again. It's exciting. Strangely enough, we are really close to that book coming out. We are the closest it's ever been. But, once I get their feedback, I will review the story, apply the lessons learned from the feedback, and then that book is going to be finalized. And then I can start worrying about the cover and the interior of the book and physical copies and sketch and release schedules and all that stuff. Don't expect it to come out, soon. Because, my beta readers are going to have that book for a little bit. It's a decent sized one. It's not crazy, but that book grew a lot during the revision process. I think I added something like 20% more words into the manuscript. Because, like I keep telling you, some writers are taker-outers, where they take stuff out of the manuscript to make it flow better. I am a putter-inner. I end up putting in more stuff, because I always forget to describe things. I always forget to explain things here and there. But thankfully, no one's ever gonna get to read that first draft, or the draft that I wrote by hand. In case you're wondering, my cat is sound asleep. Oh my god, he's so happy. He loves it when someone's recording in the studio. So, graduation. What's next for me? What's next for this book? Well, the book's gotta wait. It's off my hands. I've been trying not to think about it and failing miserably. As for what's next for me, I'm actually spending a few days catching up on everything. The podcast, the Patreon tier stuffs, the house. I have like 1,000 house projects I need to take care of. I'm exaggerating. It's not actually 1,000 projects. It's actually more like 4 house projects. I'm going to take care of all those things. I'm going to get the zine, the monthly zine that I give to a certain tier of my patrons. I'm going to get it all done. In the next 3 days, everything is going to be done. I'm going to take a day off, maybe a couple days off, depending on my schedule. And then a new journey begins. I've been thinking a lot about what I'm going to do, and I felt a revival in my spirits, and I wish only to return to the stories I didn't finish. Take that with a grain of salt. There's a book that I wrote almost 70 to 80% of last year, and that book deserves to be finished. It's a long one. We're talking about like 300 plus pages, and that book is going to come back. As soon as I'm back from my break, I am going to pick up those books. There's like 3 full notebooks full of handwriting and about 5,000 words that I typed. I'm gonna put them all back into a new file and finish that story for good. I'm not foreseeing a lot of trouble. I've been doing what I do in my morning walks, listening to music, imagining the characters again, and they're coming back to me. I'm remembering things that I thought I had forgotten. I thought it's been long enough, I completely forgotten the story, but of course the answer is no. I haven't forgotten it. It's still up here. But yeah. As for, I know I've gone really long. Someone out there may be wondering about what I said last week. I said that at the request of my lovely spouse, I started reading some older books that I'd never touched when I was in high school. I've been reading The Catcher in the Rye, in case you're wondering, for The Catcher in the Rye #update. I am almost done with I am about like 60% through the book. I only read it at night, so I'm going at my own pace. I continue to understand why teenagers reading it would hate it, and I have come to the realization that Jesus Christ, that book is slow. The pacing in that book is glacial. But I'll finish it. And I think once I'm done with that, I will most likely pick up something I know, something that would not fail me. I'm looking, it's right across from, it's like 12 o'clock position. I'm looking at it. There's a paperback copy of Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman that I'm really looking forward to reading. Not only because there's an Amazon series coming up, but also because Neil Gaiman has never failed me. So maybe that will be what I read next. And also, not to take credit away from, the late Terry Pratchett, but I like his Discworld stuff. So I'm sure I will like Good Omens. But for now, that's enough with my week. Sorry about the long update, everybody. And now, before we jump over to questions, let's talk about the sponsors for this show. We live in the internet age. You need to have a website for your business and for what you do online. That's why this week, Omakase recommends you to look up online if you want to build a website. Non sequiturs aside. Non sequiturs aside. Oh, that's bad. That joke's for one of my friends. Hi there. This show is sponsored by you, the wonderful people who directly pledge your support through websites like Ko-fi or through patreon.com/mkaren. By pledging just $1 a month, you get this podcast a week in advance, and you also get a bunch of other cool perks like my monthly video, etc, etc, etc. $1 a month goes a long way. It really does. And if you pledge more, you get more bonuses. I would like to give a big shout out to some of my biggest sponsors in Atlac. Atlac has a DeviantArt page. You can learn more about their writing and their art over at deviantart.com/AHTILAK. A big shout out as well to Hero Song. Hero Song is writing LGBT positive novels, which you can find over at smashwords.com. Just do a quick search for Hero Song. And of course, a shout out to the following lovely people: A. Howard, Elisa Dudley, Amelia, Angela, Brenda, Lishadra, Gilbert Gaudreau, Irina Phoenix, Lacey, Mark Maruska, Nicola, Pat Eichson, Polly Craftual, Soul Muse, and Synexia. The questions for today. 2 questions. First, we have a quick question, something that I received from a Patron, and I kind of wanted to feature it just as a nice reminder because, this podcast has almost been going for 20 weeks. That's about 40% of a year. That's crazy. We've been together for quite a while, and that's awesome. Thank you for tagging along. And with the Writing Advice podcast, it's likely that we will be revisiting topics. And that's not inherently a bad thing because I don't expect everyone to, catch up with the entire library. I do stuff like that with podcasts, but mostly because I'm a big weirdo. I have to start at the beginning and I have to finish at the end. It's just what I do. But I don't expect people to do that. One of my friends just randomly listens to these podcasts, and that's not inherently a bad thing. To each their own. So today we're going to be revisiting the topic of pen names. Just briefly, because my thoughts on this are very, very simple and straightforward. I received a question from a patron asking for my thoughts on pen names, and there was a particular phrasing in their question that I liked it as a launch pad for conversation, and I thought I would feature it. And the question at the end of their, proper question was, should writers be expected to use their real name for their fiction? And I think that that's, for one, interesting. And it's something that I hadn't thought about in a long time, mostly because my stance on pen names has always been pretty much the same. A name is a name is a name. I don't think it is expected that you will publish work under your real name. I think at least most of us can relate to having bad last names or having bad first names. Those are things that we have no control over, and I want to kind of highlight that. You have no control over the name that you were given. And sometimes you can be given a bad name, or an unfortunate name, or something that just doesn't play itself very well on the page. I've joked about this before, but, I'm from Mexico, where, you have 2 last names. So, I always kind of dreaded the idea of using my real name on my covers, mostly because I don't want to say it's an eyesore, but as someone who works with artists to do layout for covers, I can't find space for my full, legal name to go on a book cover. There just isn't space for that. And that's with having a first name that has 3 letters. That's how, silly the whole situation is. And not only that, but I also happen to have 2 of the most common Spanish surnames. So, and I've made this joke before, but imagine if your actual real legal name was John Smith. That's, an apologies to all of the John Smiths listening. That's a boring name. That's a boring, generic name. And, again, you don't have a choice over what name you get. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. I might argue that my poor brother got a really, really bad first name. My sister got a pretty good first name. And while some of you may be thinking, Max, don't you love your first name? No. I have grown to be okay with it, but I got picked on for it for so long. Listen, by the second year of elementary school, I was tired of all the Max jokes. Or the people who call me Maximilian, which is first off, no. Secondly, no. And thirdly, no. In case you're wondering, my name is not short for anything. It is just Max. My parents, bless their soul, actually disliked long names. That's why they gave all three of us, me and my two siblings, really, really, really short names. So, from my point of view, I've always been of the mind of, a name is a name is a name. And I think it is fitting for a writer, an author, to create their own name for how they wish to present themselves, to have control at last over how they appear on the cover, on the spine, and the title page of their books. Just like the cover, just like the title of the book, the name of the author itself is part of the package. And that's not to, to speak against those of you who have been lucky enough to have really, really good first name, last name combos. I know some of you. Some of them are my patrons who have really, really good first plus last names. Names that flow really well. And in the case of those people, I am incredibly jealous. But I don't think it's expected, going back to the question, I don't think it's expected that you will publish under your real legal name. And I think the legal part is the part that we should kind of stress, because a name is a name is a name. Not to go on a very, very long ramble, but I don't think giving yourself a different name is that big of a deal. And I think that it shouldn't be a big of a deal to kind of understand, because, oh my god, I'm about to quote Shakespeare, Jesus Christ. A rose by a different name is still a rose, and that's funny for the next bit I'm gonna say. But, for instance, my lovely spouse, who we all know as Kitty, I didn't know that it wasn't her real name, her legal name when I met her. I have always called her Kitty, because that was the nickname she liked, the nickname her friends called her, and the nickname that she gave when I, met her. So it's one of those things where I still call her Kitty. Everybody else calls her by her legal name. But it's the thing where I'm like, to me, that's who she is. And, ultimately, a rose is a rose is a rose. Oh, man. But ultimately, the name doesn't change anything. And you could have the coolest name ever, but, you still have to put in your work with your novels. Just like, even though you have a cool novel and a cool story title, you still have to work into the story. Going back to the very beginning. What's in a pen name? I think I would recommend everyone, even if you do have a really, really cool first/last name combo, consider how you wish to present yourself, how you wish to appear on the page. Even if you're not interested in doing it, just to consider it because you have the option. It is the same amount of work to write under a pen name than it is to write under your legal name. I don't think you're expected to do so, but I think it's a fun exercise to imagine how you would like to present yourself. And one little thing before I leave, one last thing to leave you with, is that writers are not the only ones who, perform their craft under a pseudonym. Keep that in mind. You have no idea how many actors you're familiar with are actually performing under a pseudonym. Alright, enough with names. Let's have our yearly Nanowrimo Talk. The month of Halloween is quickly passing. It's quickly escaping us. There's so much Halloween left with us. Quantifiably so. There's only so much Halloween left. Which reminds me that November is around the corner. And with November comes National Novel Writing Month. Nanowrimo, some people like to call it Nanowrimo, but Nanowrimo flows much better. So I will continue to be objectively wrong for the sake of pronunciation and flow. If you are unfamiliar with our November holiday, then let me tell you all about it. National Novel Writing Month is a month-long challenge where you attempt to, by the end of November, have written at least 50,000 words of a novel. The goal is to write a novel in 30 days, but 50,000 words, usually a novel does not make. And the goal is to write every day and to write an average of 1,667 words every single day. I hope I got the number right. Why do a challenge like this? My feelings about Nano have been changing with the years, and every year I get messages on Tumblr, on YouTube, people tweeting at me, asking me for my advice for tackling a month-long challenge like Nanowrimo. Do I recommend Nanowrimo for beginners? Do I recommend Nanowrimo for people who just want to get started? And my feelings are weird about this, because I have been through Nanowrimo several times, I've been through Camp Nanowrimo, and I am not sure. I know that Nanowrimo, much like, Inktober or all the Drawing October challenges, can be very inspiring and very fun for someone who's getting, invested with, writing for the first time. I do also understand that 50,000 words in a month, or, 1,000 and so words every single day can be incredibly daunting and sometimes feel undoable. And I'm not saying that it is not doable, because, I've been through that challenge, I've completed it. I am a crazy person when it comes to, doing a challenge like that. And I've also done weekly, right, I did a challenge last year. I think it was for the self-care jam, yeah, and I wrote a novel in what was basically 5 days. Because I'm crazy like that. But the thing is this. One of the challenges that I see with Nanowrimo is that if you have never done anything like this, 1,667 words, I feel like it's too much of a challenge. And I'm not saying because you can't do it. I'm saying because Nanowrimo is not just about getting the words done, it's an endurance race. It's an endurance race through November, which might be one of the toughest months, because if you're in school, guess what? You are dealing with finals. And Thanksgiving is along the way. And a bunch of other stuff. And if you're working, retail hell is just about starting. Actually, retail hell is already happening, and you might also have to deal through Black Friday. On the flip side, I do also see how Nanowrimo can be very rewarding. I've met a lot of good writers, and a lot of great friends through Nanowrimo, and I've had great experiences through Camp Nanowrimo, and, challenges like that. And it's been fun to be part of a community, kind of like the way that Inktober happens. People are tweeting about Nanowrimo, you're part of the conversation, you're giving each other inspiration, it can be fun. My main issue, and I'm sorry that this is becoming a downer of a segment, but we're getting there. You just have to get all the negativity stuff out of the way. The thing that I dislike the most about Nanowrimo, and the thing that always breaks my heart, is when writers either A, give up during the month. And I would say that it's usually after the first week. After the first week, the biggest number of people drop out. It's just the same thing as with Inktober, really. And what hurts me is that I see these people who have great ideas and want to tell their stories, and because of life and because of the nature of the challenge, they become overwhelmed and they quit. And I've seen many of those writers go through that cycle, through Camp Nanowrimo after Camp Nanowrimo after Nanowrimo in November, and it breaks my heart. But it doesn't break my heart harder than when people emerge at the end of the month victorious, and when November and when December the 1st arrives, they stop writing every day. Writing books, telling stories, is about the long run. You will most likely not write the whole novel in 30 days. And I know that sucks, because I know that part of our human nature wants things to be done quickly. We want instant gratification. But as with talents, as with skills, as with routines, you have to work at them. Little by little, every day, by day. I have recently been practicing learning a new language, and sometimes I feel bad about how slowly it feels like I'm learning it, because I want to speak the language, I want to read the language, I want to get there. I want to feel like it's natural. But I also realize that learning a little every day is better and more important than trying to master a language in a week. And whenever I feel that sense of, well, in a way it's anxiousness, in a way it's kind of anger at myself that it's taking so long, I remind myself, as we should really every once in a while, what is the goal here? What are you actually trying to do? I am in this for the long run. And I do realize that a lot of my writerly friends are about to charge into Nanowrimo and will most likely end up burning themselves. And that sucks. Because Nanowrimo is a great challenge. But I do feel that a bunch of people are going to jump in there with the wrong goal in mind. I would like to inspire you that if you wish to start writing, if you wish to get back into writing a novel, you need not wait for a challenge that happens in November to do that. This podcast is going to go up on the 20th of October. Oh man, I just remembered. You know what always hurt me? When I would see writers who were excited to write on the weeks leading up to November, but wouldn't write. And I'm like, if you're excited about the story, just start writing now. You have this energy, this inspiration, start now. Why wait till November? Why wait until April? Why wait until July? Start now. Start writing now. Take that passion and that desire to tell the story and start. Start. You don't have to write every day. You don't have to draw every day. But I think what matters is to continuously work on your project. To write when you have the chance. And to seriously commit to the story and to work on it. And I know it sucks, especially when you're at the beginning or in the middle. Or when you're facing the very, very, very rough revision pass that's coming up for you. And I know that it sucks. But this is the only way in which novels happen. As with any skill, as with any goal, as with any routine, you have to work on it. Sometimes every day, sometimes when you have the time. Countless books have been written during breaks and lunches, during the weekend, during those quiet times when the baby is asleep. I say this and I mean it. Words become sentences. Sentences, paragraphs, pages. Pages into chapters, and chapters into novels. Do not underestimate the importance and weight that carries a single handful of words. Not to be a downer, and I'm sorry if I've been a little bit of a downer, but I would very much rather you finish that novel. I very much rather it take you 2 months writing only 800 words a night, and that you do it, and you do it without having to sacrifice any of your relationships or personal time, or only having to make the less crazy sacrifices to your personal time and your family and your work and your school. Because you should be in this for the long run. Because I hope that you want to write more than one novel. I don't know about you, but I have all these ideas, and I have all these characters, and I want to tell them all. It's right there on the wall. Fill the world with stories. So, I know that I've been a little bit of a downer, but it's coming from a place of love, though, because I've been here and I've had so many friends go through this, and I don't want you to give up. I don't want you to jump into Nanowrimo as your first thing, as your first experience with writing a novel. And some writers emerge out of it. I'm not saying you won't do it. I'm not saying that you can't do it. I would very much rather that you make your own challenge and your very own routine for tackling writing, something that works with you and your schedule, something that is inherently yours and that won't be gone when November's gone and when no one else is talking about it and when no one else is posting on the hashtag and when you have no one else yelling at you to do it, that you can follow on your own and will be there with you for you to inspire yourself to push through this novel and the next one and the next one. I would very much rather that you manage to find a living routine. A routine for your writing in which your regular life can coexist alongside it, or at least with the least amount of critical sacrifices. Because life is still important, and life is going to happen. I'm not saying make contingency plans, but adjust your goals so that a single random encounter of life can't shatter your entire mission. The thing about going into a challenge like Nanowrimo is that there will be days you're going to miss. There will be something that comes up. Something is going to get in the way. There will be a random encounter of life that comes up. Sometimes we don't even realize we're pulling cards from the deck, and we do. I mean, I was joking a couple of weeks back. I just wake up one morning, and I get a letter. And the letter tells me that I have to be in a city 200 miles away from my home in a matter of days. That's just how things happen sometimes. Sometimes you get a call from a friend in the middle of the night, and you have to tend for them. Sometimes that job opportunity that you didn't think was going to come through actually comes through. And suddenly you have to get your resume in order again. Sometimes a person falls through on the group project, and now you have to pull the weight. Sometimes a family crisis occurs. Sometimes your computer dies in the middle of writing the novel, and you have to struggle to start again. Life happens, and we cannot make our plans and our goals and our routines without accounting for the possibility that life might happen. I want to inspire you to develop a living writing routine. A routine that is compatible with life and that is flexible, because life demands flexibility from us. Things happen. Sometimes I feel that I don't go a week without some sort of sitcom-like event happening. And that can be disheartening. Like, sometimes you can feel as though you just can't get a hold on life. As though things are happening to you and the waves keep crashing. And the least you can do, and it still feels like torture, is to just try to keep breathing. The stuff that's helped me in the past, that's enabled me to write these novels and to get them out there, in part has been to have a daily routine. A routine that I try not to break even on my days off. A routine where I get all of the most important stuff done right at the beginning of the morning and the day. So that the time that I have is the time that I have for the things that matter the most to me. Writing's one of them. If, though, I know that I'm going long, and I knew that I was going to go long, because Nanowrimo's a big subject, and I know I'm not saying that you can't try Nanowrimo, or that you shouldn't. In fact, I'm going long, but the next segment I want to talk about is my advice, in my own experience, for tackling a month-long challenge like National Novel Writing Month. I think that if you're going to attempt a challenge like this, I would strongly suggest, 1, Start now. Just start now. Just start now. You don't have to wait until November. I would like to inspire you to keep writing beyond November. To write and write and write until the novel's finished. I would also like to inspire you to seriously look at the time you have available to you and create a daily word goal or weekly word goal that is doable. If anything, I would recommend rounding down. Not because an easy goal is easier to achieve, but rather because something will come up. Life will get in the way. We're just getting ready in case that it happens. I would like to also inspire you to talk about your process and what you're doing. Even if you're not doing it through Nanowrimo, still talk about it. Still let people know. Still tell people. A little bit of peer pressure goes a long way. A little bit of just telling your friends and your followers, telling them what you're doing. Just a little bit of pressure. And a little bit of accountability. Again, a reasonable goal, a doable goal, because we're in here for the long run. Talking about it online to give you a little bit of extra pressure and inspiration. To be mindful that things will most likely go wrong here and there. It's bound to happen. We're not perfect. I think the expectation is that life will get in the way. That's why we get ready for it. I also would like to inspire you to keep working on this project until it is completed. The shiny new story idea will always be there. I can assure you within, let's say, the first 2.5 to 3 weeks, you will be struck with a brand new story idea. You're gonna see something, you're gonna hear something, you're gonna flip over a rock and find a good story idea in there, and you're gonna think to yourself, well, what if I start writing this new one and I put the other one away? And the instant that thought comes, you smack your hand and you drop that story idea. Leave it there under that rock. It'll be there for you when you're done. And do not attempt to write 2 stories at the same time. That doesn't work. It doesn't happen. In my experience, that has never worked. And last, but by no means least, remind yourself of your goal here. What are you trying to do? Most people spend their entire life aimlessly going from task to task, chasing things without even knowing why. Why are we doing this? What do you want to achieve? What is your ultimate goal? Because I think around week 4 is when things get the hardest. It's either the end of week 1 or the end of week 4. And you remind yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I going through this routine? Why am I sitting down to write and to create? That is a question only you can answer. But if you wish to know why I do it, it's because I want to give true form to the stories I imagine, the characters I hear, the places I have visited in the dreamlike state between the keys and my fingers, the tick and tack of the keys as they form words and sentences. The events of this imaginary world, still as real, if not more real, than the things I experience here. To give them form, to cast them in between the ink of pages, so that someone else may experience them. It is that delight of experiencing a new world for the first time that I wish to capture in every one of my stories. And like it says on the wall, fill the world with stories. That's my goal. That's why I'm here. So when the going gets rough, and when it's the end of week 1 or the middle of week 4, when I'm waking up at 6 in the morning, and I ask myself, why am I going through all this trouble? I remind myself, because this is the only thing I would rather be doing. Okay? Find your meaning. Find a flame inside of you, a candor that warms you from inside to out. This is the light and the goal that guides us, and you have to find your own. And if you find it, and you capture it, it will be a lantern that guides you through dark and cold. It's as simple as that. A lot of people spend months of writing trying to find what is it they're doing, what is it they're saying. I would like to inspire you to define your own goal, to define what it is that gives you light and warmth inside. Okay? Okay. You don't need a month-long challenge to become a writer. That I want you to remember. Okay? Okay. I didn't intend to get so real there for a second, but I guess I did. I guess I did. Sorry if we got too real there, but by now, if you've been listening to the podcast, you know how this goes. I always speak from the heart, and I hope that if anything, it helped. Now, I want to keep talking about it, but no, we gotta move over to the third segment of the show, the prompt. I wish that I had come up with a more lighthearted prompt for the end of the show, but you know me, I can't write happy stories. That's not true. You should look up Masks of Glass. That one's pretty happy. And it's also, people tell me that it's funny, but I mean, I'm hard enough on myself as it is, so the idea that I would actually write something that's funny is beyond belief. But anyhow, the prompt of the day. It is now time for us to think about our stories, or just to think creatively. Not just to think critically about writing, but also to daydream, and to think about impossible stories, and think what you would do. Because we must remember that every one of you can tell stories in your own unique way, in a way that no one else can. And I know that every single one of you, if you were to put pen to paper and finger to keyboard, you would write a completely different story based on the following prompt. If you do, you know the dealio with these prompts. If you make something, let me know. I would love to read it, or at least retweet it. And of course, as soon as you start writing, this prompt becomes yours. You can do whatever you want with it. You need not even mention me in it, or say that you came up with it from this podcast. You don't even have to do that. Your time, you're writing your book. Okay? Okay. So, on the subject of the era that we live in, the internet age, and the nature of the way in which we communicate in the internet, through these portals into a different person, these pages that display frozen time glances into who a person was, what they believed in, what they liked, the person who they considered their friends, the images they found themselves attached to, the images they believed represented them best. Today's prompt is a very simple statement. I want you to imagine a story, a short one, a long one, I don't know. It may even just be a plot twist. But creatively imagine what kind of story you would do based on the term an abandoned profile page. An abandoned profile page. Feel free to pause in between here and there to gather your thoughts. I'm going to start kind of breaking down the origin of the prompt and what I would do given the chance. I was thinking of the nature of the world we witness through the social media places we visit. Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and Snapchat and all of these places that are glimpses into a person, or at least a shard of a person. A glimpse into someone or something. And sometimes I think of those abandoned pages, those abandoned profiles of people who were there at a time, for you can see their posts, their joined date, their follower count, their profile image, and their banner. This person existed and was a real person within this virtual scape. But they are no more. I would love to claim that the story came at a realization and understanding that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of pages that once belonged to living people. A part of me would love to claim that I got this prompt when remembering YouTube celebrities who have now passed. But that's not the case. I quite literally found myself looking at a random page of a person who hadn't posted in years. A random person that I stumbled upon. And I saw a banner and a profile and a blurb underneath their picture about who they were, what they believed in. And a handful of tweets, almost from a decade ago. Who was this person? They were real for a while, were they not? What happened to them? And what kind of fun story could you write with a concept like this? I think that the most straightforward idea that comes to me is a classic exercise that we did in college. Write a story from the point of view of an inanimate object. That right there, classic. That's a classic. Kitty actually wanted me to make last week's prompt about that. And I'm not saying that you can't do that, but a part of me feels that that's not enough of a twist. I feel like it needs to have a bigger twist. And maybe it's because I'm a dork. Or maybe it's because I've been doing these prompts for like half a decade now. So I'm just like, no, it's gotta have a twist. There's gotta be a twist to this. So I want you to think. How would you twist a story about an abandoned profile page? The immediate weirdness, or should I say strangeness, that comes to me is a story in which the internet, the virtual world, is an alternate world to the one we live in. That would be one form of the strangeness. A story that tackles what happens or what it is like to this alternate realm, the virtual one in which we glance into through our computers. What happens when a page is abandoned? What happens, one could say, to the bits and data, but I kind of almost like the idea of it being a real place. That's one way in which the strangeness manifests. Ironically so, when I was thinking about the story concept, an abandoned profile page, you can write about the point of view of the page, you can write about a person finding this old profile of theirs. I would dread the idea of doing that. But but that's a thing you could do. I don't know why, but the instant that I thought of this prompt, I imagined the following scenario, okay? Hear me out. I don't know how it would happen. I don't know how it would get established. But I loved the idea of a person suddenly coming into the control of this old abandoned page. This old abandoned profile. And now this person who is not the original owner pretends to be this person. This person messages old friends, gets their hand on other profiles, and for a reason of which I am not certain of, it could just be curiosity, it could be an ulterior motive, this person becomes the original bearer of the page, or becomes the new bearer of this online page. And a part of me, even though that this is not the strangeness that I'm used to, a part of me wonders what it's like. And I feel like that right there is the nugget, the little seed that always inspires me to tell stories like this. It's the why, or how would it be like to be in the situation? What would it be like to pretend to be someone else? And how different it is from the personas we put on the internet. The people we claim to be through the photographs we post and the things we say. There is a distance between who we claim to be on the internet and who we really are. Even when it may appear to be one-to-one, there is always a gap. The persona we take before the eyes of this virtual realm are different. It's an approximation. It is like a photograph that captures the world. It is still just an approximation. Bits of data converted, projected to you through the graphical interface. The more I think about it, the easier it seems. Yeah, of course anyone could pretend to be anyone. But for how long? And what would the ultimate consequences be of pretending to be someone you're not? In between thinking about that story, because, sometimes you get a story idea, it's just what happens. I joked earlier about just, smacking your hand and putting them back under the rug where they belong. But sometimes it's not bad to, think about them. To be creative and to imagine what you would do. It's what led me to me talking to you about it right now. And a part of me wonders what it would be like to do something so selfish, something so immediately unlike anything I would do. And I guess that question is something that I always seek to answer in my novels. What would it be like to be this? What would it be like to be in this situation? I don't know what would push someone to pretend to be someone else. To message old friends. To attempt to finish what they started. To somehow get their hands on their old abandoned YouTube channel and Instagram and start creating new content under the guise of who they claimed to be. There's something there. There is a long conversation about the masks we wear, the people we pretend to be, the approximations of ourselves that we present before the eyes of the virtual world. And that right there is interesting. But it is just one perception. One approximation of what I would do. And it is different from what you would do. An abandoned profile page. Sometimes I commit to a strangeness, and today I feel like I found a pretty human and humane story idea. What do you see? What do you imagine when you hear of an abandoned profile page? What story could you write? What threats to this world could you add? What threats to the characters could you imagine? Sometimes it can just become a little plot twist. A part of me really likes the idea of our main character discovering at the end of their journey, maybe even their romance, that the person they've been talking to on the internet is not who they claimed to be. And so, welcome back to episode 18 of Omakase, a writing advice and inspiration podcast. That end wasn't as good as the ones I usually come up with. I almost wanted to have this section, where the song plays and we go into the end show. During the Nanowrimo segment, I felt like I had a really, really good hook there. But anyhow, I want to thank you for tagging along and thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. I hope that between now and the next time we meet, that you take some time to be creative, whether it is drawing for Inktober or starting that story that you've been wanting to work on forever. Remember, please, 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 to ask yourself why it is that you're doing this. To find for yourself a goal and a desire to give you light and warmth. With that in hand, you will be able to achieve anything. Okay? Okay. I hope you have a lovely week. By the next time we meet, it is likely that I will begin a new writing journey. Or rather, revising journey. But, that's life. A week is a long time. I hope you make the best of it. Okay? Okay. And now, I'm going to jump into the next segment of the show, Shoutouts. You don't have to tag along if you want. We're about to step into the end of the video club, where we stay until the end of the video. Welcome. The following are every single person who has pledged to my Patreon page, pledging at least $1 a month or more. I completely forgot about coffee, so I am stalling for time, slowly, carefully, enunciating my words to make sure to buy myself time for this page to complete. Have I received any new coffee? I did not. That's fine. The following are every single person pledging $1 or more. Patrons pledging higher get the shoutouts in the middle. Everyone else gets a shoutout now. Your dollar gets me to butcher your name approximately 4.5 times per month, and so here we go. I would like to give a big shout out to A. Howard, Atalek, Alistair Baywood, Elisa Dudley, Amanda Stevens, Amelia, Amy Palmer, Angela, Aniexo Hoshi, Biting the Sun, Blarg, Brenda, C.E. Richards, Caitlin, and the other Caitlin, Carriette Eccleston, Kathy Lindsay, Lishadra, Christiane, Christine Dennis, Kristen Lofton, Clem Pastor, Dwayne Jackson, Eleanor, Erasos. Freaking love Erasos. Erasos is so good. Oh no, no one has yelled at me about this name yet. Joffrey Raby, Gilbert Gaudreau, Hero Song, Irina Phoenix, Janosch Hebutsky, J. Tana Kirkwood, Jeffrey James Williams, Juan Nunes, K.M. Anderson, Kamishwar Rao Shaluri, Kaylee, Kiel, Kit Lee, Lacey, Lier Killo, MT Lucatelli, Mark Mariska, Mary Foster Smith, Nicola, Nicole Grissom, Nicolay. Wait, Nicolay did change their icon last week. Oh, they did, yeah. Noam Sohar, Novels and Tomes, Pablo. Pablo. Welcome back to the Pablo ASMR. Pablo. Pat Eitson. Man, remember back in the day when I would pronounce Pat's name wrong? Pat Eitchinson. I have known Pat for like 3 years now. Listen, what I want you to understand is that my ability to be wrong is beyond measure, okay? Now that right there's a promise. Polly Craftual, Raquel Fernandez, Roa, Shimmer Tales, Sky D. White, Soul Muse, Sylvia Leitilla, Synexia, and Wendy Christopher. I went a little bit too high there on the last one. I apologize. But hey, it's fine. Welcome to the end of the video club, where we stay always until the end of the video. I hope this podcast was fun. A part of me, I always get a little self-conscious when I kind of get super real during one of the questions. But I feel that at the end of it all, I'm recording this to be honest with you and to give you my sincere point of view. And it would be a disservice, an injustice to tell you anything else. Honestly, when it comes to Nanowrimo, I feel like you're better off creating your own goals. A routine that works for you. And to tackle writing not as a thing you only do during the month of November, but a thing going forward. A living routine that can work with you while you write, while you edit, and while you get your books published. Writing a book, creating a novel takes a long time. I would very much rather that you stuck around for the long run. Okay? Okay. Stay strong, work on your goals, and remember, it's not about a single day, but rather the journey that lies ahead of you, the journey of a storyteller.